Good morning and welcome to today's Planning Committee meeting. I am Councillor Caroline Karimi Govanlu and I will be chairing the Planning Committee meeting today. On the top table are Helen Bowman, Principal Planning Officer, Ben Burgess, Assistant Director of Planning, myself, Eleanor Laming, Vice Chair, and Leah Arthurton, Democratic Services Officer. We will have Chris Watts and Tracy Meacham for application 2. We are not expecting a fire drill today, but if the alarm does sound, fire exits are clearly signed in green. This meeting is being live streamed. Members of the public are welcome to film proceedings as long as they are not disruptive to the conduct of the meeting. If anyone wishes to film or record this meeting, please identify yourselves now. Please can you ensure all mobile phones and electronic devices are turned to silent. Councillors, please do not use your mobile phone whilst the committee is in session. We will have comfort breaks at various times throughout the meeting if needed. If you must use your mobile, then please leave the room. However, you will appreciate that this could result in you not being able to vote on the matter under discussion at the time you leave the room. The order of business is as set out on the agenda. Members of the public can only speak if prior arrangements have been made in accordance with the Council's scheme of public speaking. The time allocated is a maximum of 5 minutes per speaker, Parish Council. Only people who have registered to speak will be able to address the committee. The order will be as follows. The planning officer will present the application. Public speakers will then be asked to present their case, followed by questions from members of the committee to clarify something the speaker has said and not to invite the speaker to put further points across. The order of public speaking is Parish Town Council first, followed by objectors and finally supporters. Council members who are not members of this committee will then be invited to speak for the allocated time of a maximum of 5 minutes per speaker. This will be followed by questions from members of the committee. Again, these questions will only be to clarify something the speaker has said and not to invite the speaker to put further points across. The committee will then discuss and determine the application. Finally, there is no provision for members of the public to circulate documents, photographs, etc. at the meeting. Are there any questions before I open the meeting? No, thank you. We go to declarations of interest. Has anybody got any declarations of interest on these applications? No, thank you. Apologies, Leah?
Yes, Chair, we've had apologies from Councillor Baby, Councillor Tipple and Councillor Hempsall, with Councillor Wymark substituting.
Thank you. And I would like to confirm the minutes of the meeting, of the planning meeting held on the 24th of April. Is everyone happy with those minutes? Eleanor?
Thank you. This is just a minor point, but I wondered if it should say under also in attendance, Josh Shaw from Norfolk County Council Highways Department. Thank you.
Are there any matters arising from the minutes? No? And I can sign those, yeah. Thank you. Can we sign those now, Leah? Or afterwards? Okay. All right, thank you. All right, we'll go to application 1. This is the application for full planning, 2022-2010, Great Plumstead, land east of Hare Road, and I'll hand over to Helen for the presentation. Thank you.
Sorry, Ken. The application was submitted before December, so we have to be able to demonstrate a 5-year land supply, which we can't at the moment. So therefore, we are engaging the tilted balance in terms of the harm significantly and demonstratively outweighing the benefits. In terms of the credits situation, in terms of engaging that balance, the applicant has paid for the credits, but they're just waiting for the certificate to come through. So we're very well progressed with that, and there's quite a bit of a lot of certainty that credits are available to them. So just bearing in mind that we've got to engage that tilted balance. Here's the development boundary here. We also had a development here which was constructed, I think it was completed around 2020. This again was granted when we didn't have a 5-year supply historically. Just to get a bit more context of the wider area, this is the site here, this yellow section. The application will include a footpath which will granted a new application for a larger sports changing rooms and facilities there. There is a footpath down the north of Church Road, and it is possible then to have with pedestrian route and turns into a cycleway up here to get access to the primary school up in Little Plumstead and the Walled Garden community shop and cafe as well. So in terms of its accessibility, that's acceptable. There's also a bus route and bus stop just around the corner as well. So it's considered a sustainable location. Just going back, the original application was for 6 dwellings. They have amended it during the course of the application to 7. We also did have a gap in between here and this dwelling here. We have moved the development so we get a more continuous line of development in terms of the settlement boundary. In terms of the designs, they're all single-storey bungalows. So we've got a mix of designs using brick with some timber cladding, etc. They all kind of fit in with the general character of Great Plumstead. Just have a look at those designs there, and there you can see a street scene along there. So we've got slight variations in the design. Okay, just here's some photographs. So here we are standing on the junction with Middle Road. So that's the site there where the trees are. These are the properties opposite, and so just along this boundary here will be the site. And this is looking back towards that junction. So again, the site is here. The application, the development will result in the loss of these popular trees. There is an oak tree in there, which is proposed to be retained. And obviously there's some hedging here. That will have to be removed as part of the application. Those trees are in quite poor condition at the moment. They have been categorised as category C trees, which in terms of development are ones that shouldn't restrict, their loss shouldn't restrict development. They are in quite poor condition. There's some branches, etc., that seem to have already fallen off some of these trees, so that they're not in great condition. Obviously, the loss of there will be some compensation and additional planting on the boundaries and trees within the site, but there would be a small element of harm in terms of the planning balance of the loss of that vegetation. In terms of that wider landscape, you don't tend to get really wider views of the site. This is standing within the site at the moment, so you can see the trees that will obviously will be removed except for the oak tree. I think in terms of that landscaping impact, the development will be seen in context of the existing settlement. There is already development, as you can see, on the north side of Church Road, and then that impact although there is one in the landscape, is not significant. So we've, in terms of the planning balance, we've just put that down as a small element of harm. Okay, there is a change in levels between the road and the site. So at the junction end, the site is actually higher than the road. So there will need to, the drives will need to slope up. Hare Road slopes up in the kind of the field, so by the time we get to plot 1 at the other end, actually plot 1 will then be slightly lower than the road. And there is just a relationship between plot number 7 and the existing Gladen house on the corner. Gladen house is set slightly lower, but there isn't a huge difference, you'll see on the photographs, between the garden and the 2 properties. As you can see here, this is the field. This is Gladen house, which is slightly lower, but their garden is a similar level. Obviously there will be an impact on this property, but the bungalow itself will be kind of set back from that boundary. It will have a hipped roof. It is single story. Obviously there will be a fence erected along that boundary, so there isn't any significant issues in terms of overshadowing, dominance, loss of privacy. You can see here the post, which has been conveniently put here. That is where the boundary will go for the new development. So there obviously will be some loss of view from part of the garden area, but obviously in planning terms you don't have a right to a view. In terms of highway safety, one of the key reason for refusal on the previous application was actually the visibility from this junction between Hare Road and Middle Road, which you'll see on the photographs. That's me standing in the road here, and actually the visibility is pretty non-existent. So it's quite a dangerous junction. I don't have the most recent figures, but in 2020, in the last 5 years, there had been 2 recorded personal injury accidents relating to that junction, 1 slight and 1 severe. So it is a quite a problematic junction. As part of this application, the applicant is proposing to move back the hedge and create the highway verge in this area, so creating a visibility display. This obviously is a significant social benefit in terms of obviously providing safe access for the new dwellings, but also improving the situation for existing road users. So that hedge there will be removed, but it will then be planted further back. That will then become adopted highway, so that will be permanently available as a visibility display for that Hare Road junction. In terms of the visibility from the individual drives, that's acceptable now, and we do obviously, the other highway works is that we will get a pedestrian path that connects with the existing. So yeah, there's just looking at the things, as we said there, that's the existing poor visibility, that's the hedge in the street scene, so it will just be that small kind of set. It won't be all the hedge, but that will need to be, part of that will need to be removed. There's still plenty of garden left with that property, so it doesn't leave a sort of short of garden. So again, you can see that frontage hedge here will need to be removed and moved backwards. In terms of flooding and drainage, the site is in flood zone 1 for fluvial flooding, so it's not at risk of fluvial flooding. And as you can see on here, there are some areas of surface water on the Environment Agency's map, but there isn't anything on Hare Road. As part of that consultation process, we have been made aware that there is some incidence of surface water flooding on Hare Road. This is just up from the development. You can just see on the outside of the 30 mile an hour speed limit. the development will probably start about here, that there is some surface water flooding on that. So we have taken that into consideration because we have evidence that it occurs. I think in terms of the MPPF, we've got two main kind of things, is to make sure the development is safe in the event of a flood, and ensuring that flooding is not increased elsewhere as a result of the development. It's intended to deal with the drainage by soakaway on site. So that will obviously, is at the moment, the water obviously can flow unattenuated from the field into the road. So a lot of that water from the development will then stay in the site. They're also intending to include drains so that any water on the drive then is fed back into those soakaways to avoid it going onto the road. The footpath works will obviously lead to an upgrade in the drainage, highway drainage along that section of road. So there is an opportunity there for potentially some improvement of some of this water then being drained away. We don't have a technical design for that at the moment, though. So I think that there isn't an obligation for any developer to fix an existing flooding issue. It's about ensuring that that development is safe and it's not going to make the situation worse anywhere. And we're happy that that would be the case, subject to the detailed designs coming in as part of condition. In terms of the ecology, obviously we are losing some trees and hedges. The council's ecologist has confirmed that the poplar trees wouldn't be suitable for bats, and the oak tree is to be retained. There is obviously some new planting, or we can look at enhancements in terms of boxes, but it is identified as a small element of harm in that planning balance. The other element to consider is it is, or on the Natural England national maps, it is identified as Grade 1 agricultural land, which is of very good quality. We don't have a site-specific survey because obviously the Natural England stuff is done at a very high kind of level. So we've assumed that it is high quality and comes under what we call best and most versatile land. I think the MPPF in terms of that obviously talks about any significant loss. We're only talking at less than half a hectare here, so that isn't going to be significant in that balance, but we have in terms of harm, but we have identified it as an element of harm within that planning balance. So coming back to kind of concluding in terms of the planning balance, we have identified that obviously it's a greenfield site. There is an encroachment into the countryside, so there's an element of harm there. There is obviously some loss of some trees and hedgerows and a small area of best and most versatile land. All those are quite small harms, but we don't, in the judgment, that does not outweigh obviously the small economic benefits of jobs in construction and local spending in the long term. Provision of 7 new dwellings in a sustainable location, and the significant social benefit of improving that junction, not only ensuring the safety of the potential new occupiers, but also improving a junction where personal injury accidents have occurred in the past. So I'd like to recommend approval for the application.
Thank you, Helen. Does anyone on the committee have any points to clarify from Helen? Paul, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. The first one is, you mentioned a bus route there, and you said it's part of the accessibility, improved accessibility. So my only concern is how many buses go from Great Plumstead, because those villages probably don't have that many buses, and you're adding people to the village? That's the first question. And how many buses do have to go through that route for it to be classed as inaccessible? Is it just one a day, or is there a minimum number of buses? That's the first question. Second question is this visibility display. It's on a third-party land. No one's mentioned whether or not permission has been sought for that, or whether that's even feasible to. What is that, a compulsory purchase, or how does that work? My third question is about parking for these properties. You've not mentioned whether or not there are visitor spaces at all for any of these houses, whether there's space for. I mean, it looks like there might be, looking at the picture there, but I'm concerned that people will park on the road out the front there. It's human nature that people will do that, and then that's going to affect. That's going to be quite a big obstruction on that. What looks like quite a small road. So there are three questions.
Okay, thank you. I think just in terms of the bus route, I'm not quite sure exactly how many buses go through there on a daily basis. It is obviously identified in the GNLP as a settlement with a development boundary and one where we could accept growth. So it is, in terms of that settlement thing, it is considered a sustainable location for additional growth. I don't think we necessarily. I think we're just looking in the accessibility in the round. That there are obviously buses available. There isn't a sort of a defined amount in terms of that, but that sort of feeds into where that sits in the settlement hierarchy. In terms of the ownership, the owner of the site has I believe purchased the FERS, so that's in their control to be able to dedicate that as highway. So we've got certainty that can happen. Car parking spaces, there isn't any what we'd call dedicated car parking spaces, but there's obviously adequate spaces within those within the site to be able to park. What the Highway Authority have done, which is quite unusual for a development of this size, has requested construction worker parking. So we ensure that there's dedicated construction parking, so we don't have any sort of construction vehicles parking along that road. So we've got that secured, and people would have to, obviously, if they visited, they would have to park within their drives. But I think there's adequate space to be able to do that. Have I covered all the points there, I think?
Can I just go on the bus timetable? Sorry, I was just looking at I thought I'd best look at the bus timetable as well as we were here. The 14 runs, which is the green line. The 14 runs through the village. It actually goes up Hare Road, which is the road we'll be talking about. The buses start, albeit they start from within Dussindale at 7:30 in the morning, and then they run till 3:30 on weekdays, and then they run further. Then they run, albeit sporadic service, up until about it's 17:33 is what it says, and then on Saturdays there is actually a very similar service as well. So there is a recognised bus route through there, unless be told otherwise.
Is that right? Yes, sorry. I mean, I did look up the bus routes because that's a concern I have. As far as I'm aware, the number 14 doesn't run through either of the Plumstead villages. The number 33 and 33A runs through the Plumstead villages. And I checked the times, and basically there's about 6 bus services a day, and they are less frequent than hourly. They're about, on average, say every 1 hour 15 minutes to 1 hour 30 minutes, and there's no evening service at all.
So I'm apologies if I've got this wrong, but I'm just going off the Network Norwich First Eastern Counties bus timetable that has the 14. It shows me the route running through here, but let me.
Yeah, and there's also on the bus service routes, it says that the 5B provides accessibility to the Plumstead villages, but in my view, it doesn't really, because that runs along, it runs along Plumstead Road and goes to Sal House. So you have got quite a very long walk down Broad Lane to get to Little Plumstead.
I'll check that
So
whilst we have
I'll
the
check,
discussion,
yeah,
and then
yeah.
I'll come back.
Thank you. Ken?
Much reference was made in the objections to flooding, and the officer has, listed quite a lot of points about it. But in looking at 5.7 on the paper, it says it's a low risk and it is not at risk of surface flooding. But there was also reference to the fact that there's water coming off the field behind the site as an addition. And as we saw, there is flooding in Hare Road. And I was just wondering, and I'm sure Ben will deal with this, but I'd like just to be certain that the wording in the conditions, am I right in assuming, Ben, that, you will make sure that, what is the phrase here, surface water drainage strategy? Now, that is a condition, and if they don't meet the requirements, would that mean that the planning permission wouldn't go ahead? And I just felt that, after all, this flooding problem is quite a serious issue today. And I don't think we can, with climate change and all that, I don't think we can just ignore it. And I just would like more details and assurance that when you look at the conditions, which mentions, as I say, this drainage strategy, how firm is that put over, and is it really a strict requirement that you make?
Yeah, certainly. I'll talk to that, and then feel free to jump in, Helen, if I'm missing the point here. But that condition that you referred to, Ken, 16, surface water drainage strategy, I suppose one of the issues that we've got here is that we don't list out all the detail of the condition. But what we have is a preliminary flood risk and drainage assessment. It sets out what the proposals would be for that drainage for the individual plots, which Helen's alluded to, but just to reiterate, which is that there would be individual soakways on the properties, and then would be drainage channels located on the plot boundaries to direct surface water to those soakways as well. The condition that we'll put on will require the full detail of that to be submitted to us prior to the, I'm just looking at you, prior to the commencement. Or, yeah, so prior to the commencement of the development. So yeah, I can give you the certainty of that we will have the detail of that to look over and confirm that we're comfortable with.
And if you're not comfortable with it, you would stop?
Yeah, it's a pre-commencement condition, so in effect, if they don't meet the requirements that we need them to do, then they wouldn't be able to progress on with the development.
What about the water flowing from the field behind?
So it's an interesting one with field drainage and field waters.
Plenty of water still lying around in Northern.
Well, exactly. I'm going to say something you might not agree with, but I think is true. Actually, when you put in development, you can control where the water is flowing from the development when you couldn't before, because you have a field and you've got uncontrolled surface flows that aren't within our gift to work through. Whereas when you put an actual proper drainage scheme in for the development, you can control those flows from that part of the field. Well, just that part of the development, not the whole of the field. So we might be able to put some control in there that's not there currently. I think I'll just go back to the point that Helen's made in the presentation as well. We have a scheme in front of us that's not within a difficult flood zone. We're in flood zone 1. There is elements of surface water flooding, as you'll see from the pictures, and that's why we've shown them, because we didn't want to hide from that fact. But there is no, it's in a flood zone 1, so actually they follow the hierarchy and there's no reason not to allow residential development in this area. But what we can do is give as much control as we can do by having the appropriate drainage scheme in place, which goes back to your earlier point.
Okay, so
Yes, we will ensure that the drainage scheme is submitted to us, is properly checked through by appropriate professionals, and we will approve it subject to it being acceptable. And if it's not, we will send it back and ask them to sort it out until it's acceptable. Yeah.
thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ken. Karen, please.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I share the concerns just raised by Councillor Leggett about the flood risk. I also have two other concerns. One is about the highways and the reference to the junction and the safety issues that have already been reported there. There will be additional traffic not only when the development's completed, but clearly while that site's being built out, and it is a narrow road that I'm familiar with. So I remain concerned about that. Referring back to the highways comments about the visibility display and your reference to that you believe that land has been purchased, do we have that in writing? Would be one question. And two, would that be a pre-commencement condition that visibility display is, the hedge is removed, all of that work is done before the work commences? That was my...
We do have the agent here, so I'm sure you can confirm that.
I think, because obviously the adoption process is going to be adopted, so it's in the ownership of the person that owns the field, so it's all achievable. The adoption obviously takes place. I think what we'll need to have a look at the wording, whether the hedge can actually be removed and done at an early stage. But obviously the adoption process does take quite a while to go through the legalities of that. So it may be unreasonable to say that piece of corner has to be adopted before they start on the site. But I think Ben would probably agree with me that we could probably get the hedge removed. So, and that obviously takes away that provides the visibility, and then we can go through those legalities of getting that land formally adopted, which does take, it is a process that does take quite, it can take quite a while to go through. So I think it'd be unreasonable to say that fully adoption has to happen before commencement, but I think, and the agent could probably confirm that they'd probably be happy to get that hedge removed before they started, because obviously we've got the impact of any construction traffic and things, and that we've then got that immediate benefit.
Helen, can we put that as a condition? Because I'm slightly concerned with construction traffic going in there and coming out of that road, that we get the hedge down before construction.
Yes, we can have a look at the exact and how we word that. So we can maybe require the hedge to be done and then the formal adoption to be done prior to occupation or something like that.
Thank you. I was going to ask that very question. Could we add the condition that the visibility display is to the satisfaction of the Highways Authority before commencement? Because they've raised a concern, and on the basis, I just looked at their response, on the basis of the undertaking of the agent or the owner that they are going to do this work, that's why they've released their concern. So it would feel to me that it'd be appropriate to make sure we follow through on that promise.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, just go back to the slightly opening the discussion a bit, but go back to the justification for this scheme. We're considering it in the balance, and the balance that's tipping it over to us recommending for approval is the improvement to that junction to ensure highway safety. We would need to get the okay to that from the Highways Authority because they're the experts in this, not us. My only slight reticence or concern is, go back to what Helen said, if we get the visibility display in place for actual highways to agree to it fully, as in adopt it and agree that's the appropriate route, they would need to go through that 278 process, which at the moment does take a considerable amount of time. I suppose the question, or what I'd suggest is that the condition that we have, which is on there, we've got condition 11 and conditions 12. Condition 11 requires the details of the off-site highway works to be submitted, and condition 12 will require the off-site highway works to be implemented. I personally think that's enough for us to cover what we've got and is reasonable for us to ask for. I would agree, though, however, that we can get those works in place at the start as the first operation, if you see what I mean, because I completely agree with what's been said. The construction traffic will have an impact in that area as well. So I feel as though we can, what's the word I'm looking for? I suppose tweak the wording of that condition. I know you've not got it in front of you, but we can take that away and ensure that the condition is written in the right way.
Yeah, I think what we can do is potentially word it so that hedge is removed, but the formal adoption process will take longer, and that can be quite a lengthy process just because of how that goes through. So we've got that benefit once you've removed the hedge that you've got the visibility display, but obviously securing it in the long term in that formal adoption, that is just going to take a little bit longer. We just need to think about the reasonability of that. So
That's my second question.
Yeah, of course.
So that was my first one. The second one is reading on page 14 of the report, and that is the objections by the parish council, both in the original and the amended proposal. They're objecting, and one of the reasons is it's contrary to their neighbourhood plan policies 1, 2, 4 and 5. I've seen in the report references to 1 and 2, but are you able to say how you're satisfied that 4 and 5 are not an issue, please?
I'm just going to bring up the wording of policy 5.
I can help with policy 4. It's around about a cumulative effect of traffic, congestion, road safety, pedestrian cycle, parking congestion, all of those around road safety.
So we will have addressed that policy. What's policy 5?
It's fine, I'll respond to that, Alan. So, Neighbourhood Plan Policy 5 states that where green infrastructure is provided as part of the development, it should aim to improve biodiversity and connections with existing green spaces in and around the village. I'd suggest in this one there's no green spaces provided other than the gardens, so I would suggest that it's not contrary to that policy of the neighbourhood plan, which is why we've not necessarily made much reference to it in the report.
That's one element of it, but the other is about improving biodiversity, and by the very nature of the report we're saying it's not improving biodiversity. It's being built on grade 1 prime agricultural land, so that's not improving biodiversity. It's removing hedgerows and so on and so forth. So whilst I'm going back to the tilted balance, I just think that should be considered as part of the tilted balance, please.
And I think, sorry, just to interject, I think that's exactly for you as members of this committee to consider. We as officers have put forward what we consider in terms of the tilted balance of the benefits of the scheme outweighing the harms, but it's completely, that's why we're here, you as members to make a different decision if you feel that's the case.
And that's obviously why we have identified that as a harm in terms of those loss of trees and the landscape and things. So those harms are identified. So it's a case of that balance. So,
Okay, I do have one question regarding flooding and water coming off the fields. If you look on the site sections slide, plots 5, 6 and 7, the land is higher, looks like the land's higher at the back of the house. So presumably water will run off the fields into back gardens. Is that covered in the surface water drainage strategy?
Because this is the road end. So are you thinking?
The road end is on the left, is it?
Yes, this is the road end.
So the other side is the field.
Yeah, this is the field,
So
which is
5, 6 and 7 are lower than the level of the field. So if water's running off the field, go to the back garden.
I'm sick because that's the fence line.
Yeah.
So it's very, and that's the field here. So there isn't a significant. I'm not seeing a significant change.
Not significant change, no, but you're saying water runs off the field onto the road, so as if those are built, those bungalows will be a barrier from the field to the road, so the water will go down into the back gardens, won't it?
Well, I think where we're at the moment, there is the certainly at the junction end, etc. There is quite a considerable change in level between the level of the field and the road. So obviously, water will migrate off fields. I think there isn't a significant slope. We just go back to the photographs here. And it's hard to tell, but they have actually posted the, I think it comes probably across here. You can't actually see they've put posts in here, but you can't see them very well on the photograph. There isn't a significant change between, the change in level is more between the road and the field rather than within the field. There isn't any significant change there.
I know, Helen, I'm looking at the left-hand photo and it looks like the land is higher on the left of the photo than it's going down that way where the buildings are going to be. Is that not correct?
There would be a very slight, but I don't think that we would get any significant flows in terms of that. And obviously you would have the boundary hedges and things along that thing.
Any more questions?
Hello, is it on? Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee. The applicant would like to thank council officers for their comprehensive report and the detailed advice provided during the application process. We're pleased that the principle of residential development is acceptable. The applicant has carefully considered advice and comments provided during the application process and has adapted the design in response. In particular, the application proposes substantial off-site highways improvements designed following a detailed independent safety audit, which will result in a significant public benefit and improved safety for all road users. Visibility at the junction of Hare Road, Church Road and Middle Road is currently poor, and there have been a number of recent accidents. Visibility at this junction will be improved to provide the required 43 metres visibility displays when looking in both directions. In addition, it's proposed to widen Hare Road to 5.5 metres along the site frontage, allowing 2 vehicles to safely pass in opposite directions, and to provide a 1.8 metre footpath along the frontage of the development, which will connect to the existing public footpath on Church Road. This will further improve pedestrian safety and connectivity. So picking up on some of the questions relating to Hare Road, it is currently a very narrow road, but it will be widened to 5.5 metres for a good proportion of it running up to the junction. To achieve these improvements, the removal of the existing poplar trees on Hare Road is proposed. These trees are in poor condition and have been considered by an ecologist for potential bat and bird roosts. None were found. A mature English oak tree will be retained and a new hedgerow will be planted in place of the hedgerow that's lost. Additional hedgerows are also proposed to the rear boundary of the site and the west boundary of the site as well. The highways improvements will have the added benefit of addressing existing surface water drainage issues on Hare Road, as a new drainage system will be provided, all designed to current adoptable standards and agreed with highways through a legal adopted agreement, replacing the existing system, which currently appears to be ineffective and does not remove standing water from the narrow road. It seems likely that the existing drains have been badly damaged by the root systems of the poplar trees that have grown up over the last 30-40 years. Drainage has been further considered and a report has been prepared to outline the proposed drainage strategy for on-site surface water drainage. This includes crate soakways and permeable paving, which have been designed to ensure no flooding will occur, relative to a 1 in 100 year event with a 45% allowance for climate change. Interceptor drainage channels are to be provided at the end of all private drives to ensure that the surface water, any standing surface water, will not discharge onto Hare Road in very, very heavy rain. With respect to nutrient neutrality, the applicant signed a purchase agreement with Norfolk Environmental Credits, and I think as of yesterday they received the invoice and paid for the credits, so hopefully they're now reserved. The application is in accordance with local and national planning policy and would provide 7 well-designed dwellings in a sustainable location. By virtue of the design and layout, no unacceptable impact will be caused to existing residents, amenity or privacy. It's proposed to exceed current energy standards and to incorporate ecological enhancements, including integrated bird boxes to the gables of the dwellings, bat boxes to the retained English oak, and replacement native species hedgerows will also be planted to all boundaries. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and thank you for your time and listening.
Thank you. Any questions? Karen?
Sorry.
Karen first, please.
I'm sorry.
Karen first.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Got both microphones on. Could you switch your microphone?
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. A couple of questions. Referring to the point I made earlier about removing the hedge and the sequencing of that, are you able to give any reassurances to the committee on your plans with that? And my second point is linked with the comment you just made about widening the road to 5.5 metres for a length of it. Are you able to say how much of the road? Is it just the frontages of those properties? And my third point is referring to the highways concern on the amended proposal, which says the turn-in area needs to be improved on plots 5 and 6. I don't know if you could help me with those 3 questions. Thank you.
I'll start from the last question and work my way back. In terms of plots 5 and 6, the comments received from highways were considered. The layouts were then updated. They were resubmitted to highways for comment, and they were satisfied that sufficient turning was provided on plot for each of those dwellings. So the drawings were updated to take that on board. In terms of the road widening, the widening is proposed along the entire length of the development, its frontage with Hare Road. So starting on the northwest end with plot 1, it will be 5.5 metres from that point all the way to the junction with Church Road and Middle Road, and then it will taper back to the existing width and Hare Road beyond the site. So for all of the accesses into and out of the proposed plots and all of the dwellings on the opposite side of the road, it will be 5.5 metres wide. And then there will be the 1.8 metre wide footpaths on the development side of the widened road. So I don't have the dimension to hand for the existing width of Hare Road, but it does get very narrow. I'd say probably about 3.5 metres, something like that. So there are pinch points for vehicles moving in two directions, which this will address. In terms of the visibility display at the junction, all of the land in question is within the ownership of the landowner. Ingram Homes, the applicant and developer, has an options agreement, a legal agreement in place which covers all of the required visibility displays, both on Hare Road and at the junction. So in legal terms, that's all been incorporated in the current option agreement and will be then incorporated in when the purchase goes through, once planning is hopefully granted. And I'm sure Ingram Homes would be happy to sequence the works at the junction in whatever way was deemed sensible and practical to be followed on with formal adopted procedure with highways.
Thank you. Ken, would you like to ask you a question?
Yes, you made reference.
I think I'm not a flooding expert, but I think if it's coming off the field, the problem area is more towards the junction side because of the field's higher level. So rather than sort of, my understanding would be flooding off the surface of the field like a wave machine, if you like. It's more the fact that it's seeping into the field, and because it's at the higher level, it's then seeping through the bank onto the road. And there's no attenuation in that part of the field to be able to attenuate that process by providing soakaways and suitably designed permeable subbase to any hard standing. One would think that would have the benefit of then allowing a slower attenuated process of any surface water from the higher levels soaking into the ground in a managed process. And then in terms of any standing surface water that may not be fully attenuated and absorbed through the on-site soakaways and permeable paving, we'll be having channels that will intercept that before it floods onto the road and direct it back onto the on-site attenuation. So, as I said, that will, at the moment, it's being considered as a strategy for dealing with the issue. That will then be progressed and detailed by engineers to ensure that it meets the strategy as proposed at the moment has been stated that it will address the 1 in 100 year flooding event whilst also considering a 45% increase due to climate change. So it will be a fairly robust sort of bar that the engineers will have to meet. Yeah, so I hope that answers the question. As I say, in terms of the flooding off the field itself, it is quite level until it, according to the topographic survey, it's not a significant fall down off it. It's more that it's at the higher level to the road, I think, where the issues come.
Well, the report is saying currently it is flooding onto the road. So are you saying that this isn't a direct responsibility of the developer?
I'm saying I don't know the exact nature of what's happening with the flooding. Yeah, that's not my report though. But yeah, I'm not sort of I don't know exactly what's happening with the field itself in terms of the, you know, why there is standing water on the road. I would, having looked at the road and seen where the standing water occurs, it seems to be because it's not being drained away by the existing gullies and channels that are in the road. So there's something wrong with the drains in the road that run along that bank. When Ingram Homes also did the properties along Church Road, when he built that development, I think there was a similar sort of hedgerow situation that was removed. The existing drainage system along there that was replaced at the time was completely ineffective. It had just been damaged by the root system, so it wasn't a positive drainage system. So hopefully that will go quite a long way to addressing the standing water, particularly as you're also then widening the carriageway itself by a significant margin.
Creating the area where
hopefully, yeah.
But that is something that would be part of your strategy now.
Oh, well, I was going to say, Ken, it's covered under the conditions. I think we have to trust the officer to make sure everything's correct before permission is given.
But that's what I was
Yeah.
anxious to do.
And just to say one other thing, just to reiterate, we need to ensure that this development looks after its own drainage and potential flooding issues. It can't be there to sort out any issues that are there for the wider field. We just need to be satisfied and secure that it's dealing with the drainage and any water that may be coming into the development there.
Paul, you had a question?
I have, thank you, Chair. I've got a little question about the houses themselves. Did I read, I'm not sure if I did, there's going to be air source heat pumps? Each of the houses is going to have air source heat pumps? Is there also going to be solar panels on the houses and electric car chargers and things like that?
Yep, I can confirm that the proposed heating is air source heat pump, and PV arrays are proposed on all of the dwellings. That's all shown on the drawings at the moment on the elevation. So the intention is to provide both. I think the air source heat pump is subject to a condition, just to make sure that they're sited appropriately. So that information will be provided once confirmed. And electrical vehicle charging points. I think Ingram Homes have been offering them as an option, but I think on this development, their intention is to provide them as standard. Certainly is moving in that direction.
Any other questions for the agent from anybody? No? Okay. Thank you. Turn to your seat. Right, we go to full discussion. I think we have covered quite a bit when we were talking with Helen. Was there any other comments anybody wanted to make on the application? Eleanor.
Thank you. I've quite a few comments to make on this application. I mean, I'd like us to see us meet our housing targets and provide more housing in the district, but I'd also like to see that it's the right housing in the right location. So the arguments in favour of this application are obviously that the road junction is currently dangerous. Highways haven't got any objection. The visibility display can be achieved via third-party ownership, and visibility at the junction will be improved by all if the plans are approved. However, I would say that simply cutting the hedge around the firs would actually improve visibility at that junction, rather than going full ahead to make those road improvements. In other positive points, though, are that highways say the road can accommodate the extra traffic from the 7 dwellings, that parking is adequate, the housing also does meet a good design. I would agree with that, although I recognise there's not a mix of dwellings. They're all going to have 3 bedrooms. They will all be very similar. Trees and hedging will be removed, but I recognise though that the trees are category C, and replanting will be done. And I also recognise that it's not clear at the moment whether there was a 5-year housing land supply at the time the application was lodged. So we are assuming that we didn't have a 5-year housing land supply. So that obviously does have that balance. And we've also been assured that drainage on the site, if developed, will be addressed. But I do have these concerns, which I'm going to outline. First of all, the site is outside the settlement limit. It was rejected when the GNLP site allocations were considered. There is allowance in the policy for additional sites outside settlement boundaries, which do not result in any significant adverse impact. And I'm tending to think that the adverse impacts do outweigh the benefits in this application, because I would argue that it's not providing housing in a sustainable location. The land is grade 1, it's high grade agricultural land. This is, in my view, encroachment into open countryside, which is not provided for in our development plan. There is a loss of trees and hedge removal, and there is therefore some environmental harm. And there's insufficient provision of additional space for biodiversity. It's argued in the report that there are economic and social benefits. In my view, the economic benefits are small, particularly once the houses have been built, because this is a small development of 7 houses, so it's not a large development. The social role, in my view, is also very small, because yes, it does provide 7 new houses, that's good, but no provision is being made for adding any significant social amenities to the area, and the development, in my view, will be mainly car dependent. And if a social benefit mostly comes down to improving a highway junction, I do have concerns. That's written in the report in paragraph 5.29. The report in paragraph 5.14 points out that there is cycle and footpath access, but I would argue that the nature of the housing proposed is likely to appeal to the older demographic, and I contend that the village of Great Plumstead has poor local amenities, and the amenities in Little Plumstead are pretty limited too, and most journeys will be made by car. There are limited bus services. There is a bus stop, but there is one bus. I know that we said we clarify that later, but I'm pretty sure there's one bus and it's the number 33, and there's also number 33A. It goes less often than every hour, and there is no evening service. There will be no affordable housing provision, so there's no social benefit from that point of view. There will be a footpath added in along Hare Road, so that will mean that there will be a footpath going to the school in Little Plumstead, but it's still a fair way for primary school children to be walking from that housing site to the school in Little Plumstead, particularly quite young primary school children, particularly if the weather was bad. So I still contend that I think most of those school journeys are going to be made by car. Also, there isn't a full cycle path. There won't be a full cycle path to the school, because we're looking at an additional footpath alongside Hare Road, but not a cycle path, and there is no cycle path along Church Road. You turn into Water Lane, and only then, after passing that junction, can you join the cycle path that goes to the school. The shop that's marked on the plan in terms of amenities, and that's in Little Plumstead, there is no shop in Great Plumstead. The shop is actually a community-run shop. It's a social enterprise rather than a commercial enterprise. It's therefore dependent on volunteers to keep it going, and it sells a very limited range of products. So for any practical size shopping, a car or delivery by a van or vehicle is needed if those houses are built in that location. And finally, I've checked the environment flood map, and I recognise it doesn't show a flooding issue, but I know that there is serious flooding at times on Hare Road, on a location which is elevated north of the road, above the proposed housing site, When it floods, the water covers the whole road and fills the drainage ditches. The flooding therefore affects the movement of traffic on Hare Road when it's flooded. There's also flooding in the area on Toad Lane when there's very heavy rain. So Toad Lane is in the vicinity. So that means that traffic flow on both Toad Lane, which is very narrow too, and Hare Road is therefore restricted when there's very heavy rain. And as we know, the climate is changing quite rapidly and flooding is going to become an increasing issue across the district. A linear drainage channel is proposed along the site boundary, I recognise that, and that will help with the drainage on the site where the housing is, but obviously it will not solve the problems that there are with flooding in a wider area. I recognise that drainage mechanisms will be put in on the site, but I worry that water will flow down onto the site from higher up Hare Lane and also on the fields surrounding the proposed site, and that building on the site may then add to flooding on Church Road. There are no attenuation features as far as I can see, and the size of the site does not meet the requirement for the lead local flood authority to give us an assessment. And for all those reasons, I don't think I can support this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor. Any other comments from the committee, please? Sorry. Yeah, do you want to? Yeah.
Apologies about the bus confusion before, I just wanted to pick that up. I was looking at an old timetable, so apologies for that. I've looked it up, the Green Line seemed to cease doing that a year or so ago. It is the 33 and the 33A, as you've said. Interestingly, there is a purpose-built bus stop right outside the Church Road development, but there's no bus stop stand there, obviously, that's the wrong, I'm afraid saying. So there clearly is an expectation there would be a bus at some point, but there isn't at the moment, and Brickkilns Lane is the closest one, which I would agree is about an 8 to 10 minute walk away, and albeit there is a footpath, but I just wanted to confirm that you're completely right and apologise for that.
Okay, if everyone's finished, we'll go to the vote. All those in favour of the application, please raise your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 show in favour,
All those against?
and then 3 show.
Thank you. Application's approved. Thank you. Mr. Nitvicker, you may leave if you wish, or you may sit in on the last application.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Does anybody require a break, or should we just go straight to the second application? Power straight through? Okay. Right, go to application 2. Invite Chris and Eleanor to the top table. Is it Tracy? Apologies, Tracy. Chris, are you giving the presentation?
I will be, yes. So I'll present sort of the key points, and Tracy Mitchell is the case officer, so you can pick up any questions after my presentation if needed. So I'll move into the application. So this is item number 2. So this application seeks retrospective planning permission for the change of use of agricultural land. This is to be used for training of plant machinery operators using 3 and 6 ton forward tipping dumper trucks, telehandlers and small excavators. So the site, this is currently being used at the moment without planning permission. The applicant now wishes to expand the business to operate for approximately 40 to 50 days per year. Moving to the site context, you'll see here that the application site is a large field located in the red line behind the best domestic bungalow known as Sunview. This is outside the settlement limits for Hevingham. The field borders some residential properties that you can see here backing onto the heath and also the turn. as well as a local dog boarding business located to the west of the site, and also a business which buys and sells agricultural machinery located here to the north. So the site itself is accessed from the turn, which is here. This is a narrow single track lane with no through access or footpaths. Access into the field is via the driveway of Sunview alongside the bungalow and through gates which leads into the field, which, as explains, sits behind the bungalow, which is in the ownership of the applicant. Regards to the principle of development, the site is not allocated for development and does not meet any specific planning policies in the development plan. So as such, it is necessary to determine whether the impacts of granting permission in this case would significantly outweigh the benefits of the scheme. So in terms of those benefits, these are essentially the staff who currently operate the site, as well as one further part-time member of staff, and the wider employment opportunities through the training courses that this business provides. So I'll now just talk you through some photographs. So this is a view looking down the turn. So as described earlier, this is a narrow single track road with no footpaths. This is the junction of the turn and the heath. Again, fairly restricted in terms of the width of the highway and access to the site by vehicles. This is a view now looking at the site access, so you can just see the bungalow on the edge of the screen where the arrow is. So the site access comes from the turn and through the private driveway space of Sunview, and you can just see that view, but looking in the other direction from the turn and in the heath in the distance. As a closer view of that access, so you can again see that bungalow there and the gated access into the site which sits behind those gates. As a view now taken from the site looking back towards the turn, and another view on the right of the screen from the driveway. So now we're within the site itself. So this scaffold tower is associated with the business and telehandlers, so they use this for the purposes of training operators of some of those vehicles. There's also a porter cabin here, which you can see on the screen, which forms part of the training business for people using the site. So further views within the site looking north towards the site boundaries, and again views looking south and west. So now I'll probably move on to some of the highway issues associated with the proposals. So as reported, the Highway Authority have been consulted on the proposals and they've formally objected on the grounds that the turn is inadequate to serve the needs of the development due to the width of the road, the lack of turning, as well as the substandard construction of the road with no passing provision for vehicles. The site is also not considered to be capable of parking and manoeuvring a delivery vehicle on and off the premises for the purposes of offloading the plant machinery, such as a loader, without obstructing the highway. Furthermore, the Highway Authority consider that the heath to the north of the site is not a safe alternative to offload machinery, which has been suggested as an alternative for the applicant. This is again due to its narrow width, where offloading machinery would cause obstruction to the highway. So on this basis, and having regard to the various objections received, officers considered that the site cannot provide the basic requirements to allow the delivery of the training vehicles due to the physical constraints of the site and the surrounding highway network. Finally, turning to residential amenity, members should note that public objections have mainly centred around the delivery and use of the plant machinery and issues relating to noise and also the blocking of the turn during the delivery of equipment. The Council's environmental quality team have also been consulted on the proposals and have also objected to the application, commenting that the proposed activity could result in significant impact on the amenity of occupants of the residential properties close to the site, such that it could be justified, it could be considered, to be a statutory nuisance. So again, having considered this along with all the comments received, as long as the justification provided from the applicant, officers considered that the noise and disturbance from operating heavy plant vehicles within the site over the course of the day will have a significant adverse on the amenity of neighbouring dwellings. In terms of other matters, these are set out in your report but are generally acceptable. So moving on now to the conclusion, it is evident that the benefits of the scheme in providing one further part-time job on the site, as well as other wider employment opportunities associated with the training of plant operators, do not outweigh the adverse impacts of the scheme or provide a clear or convincing reason to justify planning permission in this case. So as explained, the proposals would result in significant harm to the highway, also the residential amenity impacts. So on this basis, the application has been recommended for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I don't know about you, but I think it's pretty straightforward, this one. I think due to Highways comments and having such a business in the middle of a residential area, I don't agree with it and I will be voting for refusal. Anybody else has any comments? Karen?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd echo what you've just said. I've heard from the planning officer and also referencing the experts in the Highways Authority, so I would also support the refusal.
Any other comments from anybody? No, can we go straight to the vote then? All those in favour of the application, please raise your hand. No, all those against? That's unanimous.
Unanimous for refusal.
Thank you. Right, I'm going to hand over to Ben for the planning appeals. Ben?
Thank you, Chair. So we've got a few on here today. I'm not necessarily talking any detail about the ones that have been submitted, albeit to say that they were applications that were delegated, so they didn't come in front of members of the planning committee in any case. The key one I'm going to refer to is in the appeal decisions from the 12th of April to the 10th of May. We had two that were dismissed, which were comfortable and reasonably straightforward decisions, so not really any learning from them, and they're both delegated. They were the right decisions at the time, and the inspector pretty much dismissed them out of hand. Excuse me for 1 second. The one I am going to reference is 2023-8096, which is Havringland Hall, which for any members who've been around for a long time will probably know of Havringland Hall. As you know, I went away and came back, and this one's still here, which is an interesting thing. So it was an enforcement appeal. We took enforcement action because there were a number of the caravans on site. So sorry, I should say, for those who don't know, it's a caravan site out at Havringland Hall. A number of pitches there, but actually a number of, and we'll come on to a minute, a number of what we consider to be buildings. We took enforcement action because a number were being lived in on a permanent basis, and that wasn't the original intention of the permission. There was a specific condition on there, I think condition 4, that required they weren't permanent residents. However, when we took enforcement action, when we found out there were a number of people who were living there permanently, the inspector it was appealed, went to the inspector, and the inspector then looked into what defines a caravan through the Caravan Act, and in this instance the idea that they were looking at was that to be able to be defined as a caravan you need to be able to move it in one piece, but there's a number of large caravans that are on the site there, and when the inspector, I wasn't at the side of it, but I understand the inspector literally looked underneath the caravans to see that they were built in two pieces and determined that if you were to move them as one piece, they would in effect break apart. So therefore, didn't class as a caravan, but classed as a structure in the inspector's opinion. Now, the inspector, there's no comeback from our perspective. Whilst we might not agree with the decision, the inspector has interpreted the law in the way that they determine it to be. Whilst we might not agree with that, we are where we are with it, unfortunately. So what's happened now is that breach of condition that we consider to be the case has been quashed, and so we can't require those caravans, it's all of the double unit caravans, we can't require that condition to be enforced in terms of them not being permanent residences. So I suppose what I'm saying is we're now at a next point where we're going to move it forward, because we now need to decide what we're going to do with the site as a whole. So the interesting thing to take from that is, I suppose, the definition of what's a caravan and what's a structure, and I suppose also bear with us, because this is a slightly complicated enforcement case that will take some time for us to work through. So yeah, that's where we're at with that one, Chair.
If they're deemed as permanent residences, then they not need planning permission for them?
No, because they've been lived in for a period of time now, so they've got the consent. So we have, in effect, a caravan park that's got permanent residences, is class C3 dwellings that we need to try to somehow regularise, which is the next stage of our enforcement action.
There are plenty of caravan parks around where people can live 12 months of the year, and I'm assuming that this is called a holiday park rather than a caravan park, isn't it? So
yeah, that's fair.
11 months of the year. What's the implications then of it being classified as a structure rather than a caravan? Is there any change?
It in effect becomes a permanent residence. It would become a dwelling house. That would be the potential issue with that, yes.
Surely this would affect not just the park here, but lots of parks all around the country, will it not? Because there's a lot of, I mean, these aren't special units, these are just, I know this park quite well, because my in-laws used to live there. But they did have another residence. They were there 11 months a year. So this does have a bigger knock-on impact for the rest of the country, surely.
I think if people were to pick up on this decision, then I would agree. But I suppose for us, we're just trying to focus on this one because it's a challenge for us, but I wouldn't necessarily disagree.
So what can you do?
Can I just say we're going to cut the live stream and end the meeting at 10:50.